Hello and welcome to Mindfulness Unscripted. I'm John Orsini, and today's conversation is with Dr. John Stewart, PhD. Dr. John is a clinical psychologist, and he specializes in child and adolescent psychology, and he does a lot of work with IFS, internal family systems. Dr. John is a huge advocate of the breathwork that I guide and is, in fact, a client, and I'm grateful to say has become a friend. We cover several topics in this conversation, including some of the biggest mistakes that parents make in communicating with their child or adolescent, overcoming self-sabotage, shame, and cultural conditioning. And we discuss the difference between surviving versus thriving and how you can find more adventure in your life. Enjoy this conversation with Dr. John. Practical mindfulness that meets you where you are. This is Mindfulness Unscripted. I'm John Orsini.
There's a sense of acuity that I had to who I was outside of the culture. I certainly got it when I was, 21 and in the Peace Corps in Patagonia. Just this sense of dropping away that I had thought of as me, that they weren't. They were what the culture kept reflecting back, and it was just. I think that experience. I think for almost anyone, I would recommend, having the opportunity to immerse yourself for a period of time in a distinct culture.
Yeah, it's fascinating you bring that up specifically in terms of the breath work as well, because I think of so much of the work that we do in that, and I'm sure I've mentioned this in different groups that we've done together, but around cultural conditioning, right? So a couple pieces there. One, you mentioned the fish just lives in water. So if you say, "Hey, how's that water?" They'll just be like, "What?" Like that's just the environment they're swimming in, right? But when you are a fish out of water, which is, that's a way to identify like, oh, you could be watching a movie, a story, be like, oh, that character is a fish out of water, right? So it's almost sounds like to voluntarily make ourselves a fish out of water, all of a sudden we can look at water and recognize, oh, that's where I was, and I can go back to that, but this is what it feels like to be out somewhere completely different.
Oh, that kind of, yeah. I think I think the analogy, the parallel with the breath work is that works for me. In that there is this sense of just stepping away, and it's yeah, it's an opportunity for renewal. I mean, you come back into your old self,
Yeah.
but you come back in having looked out some windows that you remember.
Yeah, absolutely, and, that's it. It's like it's just in the case of travel, right? You leave your culture, you leave your quote unquote "water," and then you go into a different place, and all of a sudden you're like, "Whoa," like you said, "I'm this person from this culture. Now I'm in this totally different culture." It makes you more aware of where you're from and who you are or who you think you are or whatever it is. And then, like we're saying, like, similarly, in a really interesting similarity with the breath is it's just your breath, and you don't even have to leave your own freaking bedroom, quite frankly, and you just start the breath moving, but it brings up, it creates these shifts in brain chemistry, so it alters consciousness, and we start to see ourselves and experience ourselves so differently, like aspects of ourselves that either were dormant for a long time or we didn't even know were there. And I think so much of it sheds light on who am I really, like the wisdom in my heart, who am I beyond space and time, like who is my soul basically, versus what has been imprinted upon me. What are the values I was raised with through family or media that I think are me but aren't actually me at all. And like breath work can liberate us from that. Travel can liberate us from that. Exposure to great art can liberate us from that. So we could get to our soul, essentially.
No, no, John. I think they're all pathways.
Yeah.
That's the things yeah, that's so fun, remarkable about life is that you either intentionally or accidentally stumble on to all kinds of different pathways if you keep your eyes open.
Yeah.
And we get into trouble when we keep our eyes down and we keep ourselves away from the lower brain likes what's familiar, and it's
Mm.
wired to do that because what's familiar it has survived in the past, and that's all the lower brain is really just. It's this dichotomy: will it kill me or will it not kill me? and
Yeah.
and if it didn't kill me, I'm going towards it because it didn't kill me last time. But it does. It's just this deep, uh, uh, powerful kind of habituation to a way of looking at life. You know, the Buddhist notion of beginner's eyes is just such a sweet notion that, you know, the first time you walk down the street, you're looking around, you're seeing everything. The 100th time you walk down the street, you're not looking at anything. You're looking at the image that you've created in your mind of what's on that street for the most part, unless something new comes in.
Right.
But there is not much joy in that. There's not much
Mhm.
wonder in it. You
Right.
know? And that and I think there are all kinds of different things that shake us out of that, you know, whether it's
Yeah.
nature, whether it's, you know, a dog that surprises you with some sort of enthusiastic greeting, or children, or the sky at night, or, you know, there's just lots of different places that,
Mm.
but you have to stay open to it. And that's easy, you know, it's easy to find ourselves grinding back within that which is familiar.
I think of it as surviving versus thriving.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, surviving is just like, okay, how do I just get through this? Versus thriving is an openness to new experience. Even you mentioned walking down the same street 100 times, that we're at a certain point, usually unconsciously, are operating off these images of what it was in the past. But what's so interesting is even when it's the same street, the lighting is never exactly the same. The weather is never exactly the same. It's always new in every moment. So it literally is new in every moment if we're willing to see subtlety.
If we see it,
Yeah.
if we're willing and able to do that, you know, I think when you say about, you know, thriving versus surviving, you know, there is also, and this kind of back to the lower brain's, you know, absolute obsession with perseverance, with survival,
Mhm.
that to some extent, I think you have to be willing to risk the loss of your survival to thrive.
Mm.
You have to be willing to step away from the familiar. You have to. You know, I work with a fair number of young folks over the years. I've worked with a lot of them, and I'm a clinical psychologist. And the one of the things that is so clear to me is that there is nothing more important than an adventure. It's for kids to take an adventure, or for adults, anybody to take adventures, but it's not an adventure unless at some point along the way you're asking yourself, "What the fuck am I doing here?" You haven't met the criteria if it doesn't happen.
Mhm. Truly unfamiliar, right? Unfamiliar territory.
Truly unfamiliar, and that scares
Mm.
us. That scares us.
Like another thing I like to point out related to that, and thank you for sharing that because I'm excited to get into all that with your experience in psychology, doctorate, everything, and we've had just so many great conversations as we started to get to know each other and through sessions and everything, and so I'm just really glad to get into all this. Eh,
You have been a blessing, John. It's been fun. You've been an adventure, and a good one. And
Thank you.
as of yet, I haven't asked myself, "What the fuck am I doing here?" So it's good.
Yeah, yeah, no, back at you. Thank you. And just the idea that part of that is like, what am I even doing here? Can come up around feelings that are, you would say, are objectively pleasant feelings, right? Like if for whatever the reasons, and there may be many for different individuals, if we haven't allowed ourselves to feel love, if we haven't allowed ourselves to feel joy, if we haven't allowed ourselves to feel gratitude on a deeper level, all of a sudden, if we open up to experience, like say in travel, and we're just overwhelmed by the generosity of some culture, right? Like, oh, I'm used to living in a culture where people just walk with their heads down and just get to the train and that's that. And all of a sudden you're in a culture and everybody's just so sweet. It may feel uncomfortable to just like smile back at people, for instance, because it might feel really vulnerable and really unfamiliar. So opening up to all that, like, what the hell am I doing here? That's not always just, it could be beautiful. Things are like so beautiful, we don't know how to tolerate them,
Absolutely.
you know?
Yeah.
So, well, actually, I want to ask another question before I ask about your background, how you built up to where you are and everything. I wanted to ask this question while it's top of mind, and it's around a sense of, I don't know, maybe self-sabotage. Like, so what you think about the idea that if, for instance, a person's walking into a new phase of life, and say it's like in a job promotion or maybe in a really nice relationship, like something starts going well. I think I read this as the upper limit problem. I'm trying to think. The Big Leap. Yeah, the book's called The Big Leap, and the guy's name is Gay Hendricks.
Okay.
And he has this term, the upper limit problem. And once we hit our upper limit of allowing something to feel good, essentially, we'll do something unconsciously to sabotage it because we all have only a certain amount of limit. Like, do you have thoughts around that or like different?
There's a concept in psychology that's it is kind of it is the notion that I am I'm sabotaging, I'm self-sabotaging. And I'm going back and doing something over again in a pattern that I've done in the past, kind of falling back into that pattern. And there are some folks who do think about it as a really frame it in the context of self sabotage. I don't think about it that way. I think about it maybe in a more generous way. I hope
Mm.
that we're going back to try to fix it. We're going back to try to do it differently this time. And now the patterns can be so, patterns, we are so drawn to what we've done in the past. I mean, the bias in the lower brain for what we have done in the past is enormous. But I think that the bias in the heart and the bias in the head is to find our way through it. So I mean, I think there's a tension there. And I don't really think about it as self-sabotaging. I think of it as a pattern that has been habituated, and an upper mind that is having to work at asking that pattern to step back. It's one of the things I like about the IFS model, internal family systems model, which uses the notion that those things that we have brought into that we call, sometimes they blend with our core self and we think that this is who I am. Um, that if we want those things to step back, we first have to honor them.
Mm.
First have to say, that came into my life, that way of coping, that part of me came into my life with the intent of, was really with the purpose of protecting me in some way. And it may be that I've grown beyond that and I don't need that protection like I did when I was a little one, when maybe I developed that part. But to be harsh with that part and kind of say, what sort of fool am I? Why would I keep doing, that kind of self-critical stance doesn't help that part step back. It's almost as if that part will intensify in response to shame. It'll say, like hell, you're going to ask me. I'm going to step back. I've kept you alive all this time. I've got, maybe the dialogue isn't that explicit between the self and the part, but it's there. And so when I think about repetition compulsion, it isn't an intent to move to sabotage. It's an attempt on the lower brain to keep us alive that we can overcome, but not with a sense of disdain for that part of our brain that's trying to keep us alive, but rather recognizing it, thanking it, and saying, "But I got this one, buddy." You know,
Mhm.
you can step back. We don't have to do it that way. So I think the self is always trying to it's always trying to help us. It is
Mm.
always there, and I don't really think that we have a part that comes out of a deep part of us that intentionally sabotages us. I do think that another phenomena is I think about, I'm in Maine, walking out on the ice at the beginning of the winter, and maybe you want to go skating, and you're not certain how strong the ice is. Well, you walk out a little ways, and what's the first thing you do? You jump up and down on it a little bit, because if you're going to fall through, you want to fall through on the edge.
Mm.
You don't want to
Yeah.
fall through out in the middle.
Yeah.
And so I do think that there are times when we we may test the edge of a relationship, the edge of an experience, in effort to not find ourselves too far out there and then discovering it won't go through. I think that can happen, but that too is done in an effort to really to protect us.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And the more I get into, this is like a phrase from a Lauryn Hill song, another musician that I love. And yeah, yeah, everything is everything. Everything is everything, and it's just it's such like a broad thing to say that it's almost, unhelpful, but that this is what this makes me think of because the whole idea around self-compassion and the whole idea around reframing and the whole idea around, just like you're saying, meeting that rather than saying, "Oh, this is self-sabotage, I need to fight myself to overcome this." The best way to actually move past things, as I'm hearing you say this in like reflection, the best way to actually move past something is to recognize how it was trying to help you
Yeah,
and say, I got this, buddy. Like how you just said that, like, okay, I see you. I appreciate what you're doing. I've got it. That's actually the best way because otherwise it's like this universal principle that when we push on something, it pushes right back,
absolutely,
you know?
absolutely.
And so in the same way with, so as a parallel with breath work, as like a sort of a proxy of this experience, if you just brass tacks want to move through something, you have to meet the edges with curiosity and awareness, not try to push through them with a bulldozer because they're not going to go anywhere. Or in that sense, it's what it sounds like.
Oh, I think or they may give they may give way for a moment,
Yeah,
but you're
right.
going to pay for it.
Right.
It will come back. It will come back. Yeah, it's the notion of brass, of just holding on with all your might to get through versus the opening up and saying, "I'm gonna let go," and then
Right.
move through.
Another vague thing I've been saying lately, but I can't think of a better way to say it, is the thing is the thing.
Yeah.
So, like, if we're operating from a sense of, that sabotage because we're afraid to allow ourselves to feel a new feeling, essentially, but then that fear of not letting ourselves expand to the next level is trying to push that other fear away. It's like you've got 2 fear forces battling, and the thing is the thing. The fear is the fear. So if there's a fear, you would have to meet it with, love, acceptance, compassion. I don't know. Like, that's actually the way through.
You welcome it in, and then you
Yeah.
figure out how you go. Yeah.
Yeah, I just love that there's a just to kinda, like, tie that all together, I just love when there's a pragmatic reasoning behind compassion, and especially self-compassion. There's an actual reason why it works better, that it's not just fluffy language, it's not just, "Oh, just be kind to yourself," that it actually works better when there's this pragmatism behind it.
Right. When the narrative is coherent, it's much easier because a lot of this work, the narrative is kind of the left hemisphere. It wants to write stories. It's going to use language. It wants things to make sense. And the right hemisphere is emotion. It's the limbic system, and it's where there's tremendous wisdom and compassion that really is lodged more so in the right hemisphere. But if you can't give the left hemisphere a good narrative to explain why it is that what the right hemisphere wants to do makes sense, it's going to bully it because the left
Mm.
hemisphere, yeah, but why? But it doesn't make sense. And so I think that that process of being able to have a coherent narrative that I mean, it's really no different from art or poetry or music lyrics. You've got something going on over here, and then you struggle to find, you know, tonal expressions of it, or color expressions, or poetic expressions that express it. So
Mm.
when we have a wisdom that seems to be coming out of the right hemisphere, it is so much easier to let ourselves go down that path when we can create a narrative that's coherent to yeah, that makes sense.
Mm.
There's the science. There it is. We'll let you do that.
Right. Right, it's like an anchor or something, so it doesn't we just don't, like, float away into the ether or whatever. Not like we would, but it's, necessarily. That makes me think of too even, talking about the arts. I think it might have been Liev Schreiber, the great actor. He's a Shakespearean actor as well. He's famous from TV and stuff, but, and films, but, also great stage actor. And I feel like I heard him say something about this, but essentially when you're working with Shakespeare, when you learn the structure, you can't just like run at Shakespeare and just go willy-nilly with it. It'll sound incoherent, especially by today's standards of the English language. But so when you understand the rhythms and the structures, then that actually liberates you. Like it's freedom within the form.
Right.
The form, or like sometimes I'd say the best directors build a playground. So the best directors, they build a playground and then they trust you, the actor, go wild in that playground, but they built the playground, right? But now it's on you to go wild in there, but there's a form, you know?
It's a
Um,
form.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
I've thought of that.
No, we crave, and I don't want to dismiss the wonder and the value of that left hemispheric, logical, linear kind of
Mm.
analytic place. In fact, I don't really want to drive across a bridge that was built by an artist who has very little of that.
You're right. Yeah, it makes wonderful sense. Yeah. So with all that in mind, and coming from your background in psychology and everything, in the sessions like the breath work that we've done together, what is your like how has your experience been of that? And I'm thinking of it in the way of course your personal experience just as a human on the planet, right? And then talking about these left and rights when the PhD psychologist coming in saying, like assessing your experience within the context of the experience you had in breath work. Are there things that have stood out to you in those sessions or like different things that have gone on in terms of the shifts in uh, consciousness or different aspects of it that stand out to you?
Yeah, I mean, John, I think that when I think about my background in theory and research and such, it's much like that playground that you described. It's the structure maybe a good director provides, and then lets the actor go play.
Mm,
I've got that structure, but I don't, and I live within it. I live within many aspects of it. But is the playing in that. The magic of the work is being able to know that stuff, but then to go and be heartfelt, be compassionate, be I guess you hope you're wise. I guess that we're never a great judge of that, perhaps of ourselves. But I think that, and when I look at breath work, um, and I'm oftentimes, as I'm advocating breath work, I alternative psychotherapies are something that I have a fair amount of belief in. I'm not trained and I don't do psychedelic psychotherapy with patients, but I believe in it and I help patients integrate it when it's being done in other settings. I just never went for the training in that arena, and um, but I believe in that. I believe in the experiential uh, uh, forms of healing. I believe that there are just many pathways. I believe in the role of art. I believe in the role of nature, of immersion. So they're just. I know research, and I know, I have pretty good understanding of the brain and interpersonal neurobiology and some of those kinds of things. But where I found breath work to be something that I have found just really powerful and helpful for me, and in my experience with patients, which I'm just now moving into doing myself, but I've had patients I've referred them to other folks for breath work. It is essentially what we were talking about earlier. It's stepping away from a self that's defined by lots of experience and trauma and challenges, and it's stepping into really a sense of a core sense of self that's I think loving, probably at the top of any. If I were to say what is it feels like what I would have to say is love, and that
mm,
when we're able to do that, it's safe. It's it allows us to breathe.
mm,
It allows us, to continue to breathe when we're able to bring that back with us from the experience. I think it connects us to our breath in a different way after we're not involved in a specific exercise. Um, yeah, it's a step. It's a pathway towards hope,
mm,
pathway towards kind of starting over and letting go of the narratives that have felt so constricting. I, you and I have talked that I'm wanting to use it with families more, and I've started to do that. Some actually, I used a YouTube video of you with a family last week,
mm,
and kind of set it all up, and just had a really powerful, wonderful experience with these folks who were very much struggling. One adult child and one teenager, and parents, and they're not in a good place. A very complicated set of circumstances, but it was probably the moment at which there was the greatest sense of healing.
Mm.
This-
Yeah.
Everybody stepped away from their story, and they just kind of felt one another's presence, and it's beautiful. So I see it in both the value of the breath work that I've done with you is in both the um, healing within the individual, but I also think that there's kind of transpersonal dynamics that become accessible in the
Mm.
context of the breath work when done with loved ones,
Beautiful.
or maybe even done with folks. Hopefully, we could get to a point where we could do it with folks from different tribes,
Yeah.
political tribes, and
Oof.
such. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I think as you're sharing this, we were just a handful of minutes ago, we were talking about love and fear, and talk in the sense everything is everything. And once again, I'm hearing this theme arise. Am I in a state of fear? Am I acting from a state of fear, this state of self-preservation? Or am I acting from a state of love, which can feel vulnerable, which, yeah, it's open. And and the breath, that's what I found as well. And something I love so much about of course, like you're talking about the individual experience, and then you mentioned transpersonal, like in our connection with others. And the idea that so often, especially, I can only imagine, the depth and amount you've worked with families, right? So I can only imagine, because I know this personally. I know that I've done, like mother-daughter sessions, like, relationship sessions, couples sessions, and I don't do it certainly from the place that you would with, internal family systems and things like this, because I'm not a
it's not very. You know what? Yeah, this is about the key that opens the heart.
that's
Some of the other stuff that I talk about is being that, the narratives and such. That's helpful, and but this is, I think it's not the only key that can open the heart.
yeah.
It's a powerful one, and it is a quick one.
That's it, and that's it. So that's exactly it, right? Like I'll be with, two family members that have been really struggling because for any number of reasons, completely valid ones, old wounds, old hurts that they've caused each other, again, families or couples, whatever it is. And then I guide them through the breath. And it's like very often I don't have to say a freaking word. And they'll come out of it and just look at each other and they're just embracing. They're just because it's just that shift from, I think, again, maybe this is a way oversimplification, but it's that shift of being in that state of fear to shifting in that state of love.
I
And
don't think it's an oversimplification.
yeah,
I think that's it. You did a session with Jan and I, my wife and I, and um, at the end of it, you had us just share kind of how we felt about each other. I can't remember how you phrased it, but
yeah,
it was probably I've been married almost 50 years. We've been together for 50 plus. And I would say that was one of the most, and we have a wonderful relationship, except for when we don't, but that's reality.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
but, but I think that was one of the most tender moments between Jan and I, certainly in a long time.
Mm,
Just, what we each, yeah, and what we were afraid of, what we meant to the other, and then what we were afraid of.
yeah.
And I think we both were able to, boy, just see each other with such tenderness. So yeah, he who lives by the sword dies by the sword, John.
Yeah. I appreciate you, I appreciate you sharing that, and I appreciate so deeply have just been being there, to witness, like, to just be there with you both, because it feels, and I don't mean this in a I don't whatever, I don't care how this sounds, I love this work so much, as I know you do too. I don't just mean the breath work, I mean the work that you do in the world. And what a great gift to love the work. But the reason I love it is because of moments like that, that I could just be there and witness. It's not even anything I do. Like I'm like, okay, here's how we go, and like it's gotten the session. But then again, the breath just takes it. opens these channels to the heart, and then I just get to witness these moments, and especially again in those families and couple sessions. I had someone I remember in a group session, and this person came out of a group session, and they said, when we were sharing at the end, just said, I have never felt more connected to the universe and the people I love. And just to be in those rooms and feel that, and feel when, like you were just sharing there. So again, thank you again for saying that. And thank you again for just having, for allowing me to be there, just to
It
witness.
was,
I mean,
I mean, I think that, John, I do think that the the message, the process, and the messenger are all important to making that work. The message is, we're going to help you open your heart. We're going to help you step away, whatever that means, and the method is the breath work, and the technique. But I also believe that when the practitioner is someone who has a very open heart, and not and really is there predominantly to be a part of something that feels like it's healing and whole, and driven by love. That's the tripart magic, man. And you're good at it. I'm not you, or there's just a tenderness in the way in which you do this that doesn't. I'm not saying you don't have an ego. We all have egos. We all have, but that's not what's driving you there. And it's so clear that you've worked hard to refine within yourself the capacity to show up in that way. And first time I met you, Kripalu, I went up to you afterwards because I want to know this guy better. One, I was thinking that I wanted to bring breath work into her, but I think what I told you, I said, I want to do that exactly like you did. you know, and clearly I have to do it my way. It has to be me, but I want to bring my heart into it in the way in which you do it. So, that's you're clearly in a vocation. This isn't a job.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying so. It's like one of those things, well, talk about, like with being an actor, with being an artist, it's finding like what a gift and a vocation to say, that you want to wake up every day and do something, but that once you've started doing it, you can't imagine not doing it. That feeling, it's almost like, I think there's that Talking Head song. It's essentially like home. I forgot how the lyrics go exactly, but essentially the gist, at least that I always got from it, was like, you're home when there's like nowhere else to, it feels like there's nowhere else to be, basically, in a sense. It's like, thank you for saying that. And so in terms of your journey, what brought you to where you are, like all the pieces. I mean, I'm sure whatever feels like pressing in terms of how you came to your vocation, like going off.
I, yeah, no, I'm happy to share that. I mean, I think I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up. My dad was a Presbyterian minister. My mom was a elementary school teacher, but both of them were complicated. My mom came out of abject poverty and lots of abuse from the Deep South. And my dad was put in an orphanage with his two sisters when he was 5. And because mom and dad got divorced, and then mom came back and got the 2 sisters, and never saw his sisters or his mom again. And eventually his dad came and got him. So they both had a lot of sorrow, but oh my God, did those 2 love each other? They
Mm.
they were, I mean, I sometimes, my mom was hard. I left home. I didn't graduate from high school. I left home at 17 because I was going to bury her in the backyard if she didn't bury me in the backyard first. Yeah, I had two older siblings. I love my mom. My mom died 93, uh, 5 years ago, and I got, but she was hard. She was not an easy mom, and I had a learning disability. I was slow to learn to read, and undoubtedly, if you ask Jan, she said that it's not fully resolved yet. I had ADHD. I've got a lot of energy and a lot of, relatively creative in that way, and so um, I think that it started with that. My dad was an interesting guy. My dad was a Navy pilot and had a doctorate in law from Notre Dame, and he was an FBI agent before he went into the ministry. But
Mm.
my dad had the capacity. He was just profoundly kind. He was just, you could walk into my dad's presence and you could tell he made you feel like there was nobody else on the planet he wanted to see more than you right now. Now, I had a special role with my dad, but he was that way with his parishioners. He was loved, and he's just a good guy, really, and, bright, interesting thinker. But you wouldn't, as somebody close to him, he just seemed like this sweet, kind of goofy guy who loved his family. And he did love his family. So I came out of that. I came out of the Midwest with the experience of early learning disability, traveled a fair amount, and ended up at one point going to the University of Utah because I wanted to learn to ski. Didn't seem all that interested in going to school, but and that's where I met my wife, and she was from Salt Lake City. She wasn't raised Mormon, but her parents had been, and she came from a large, complicated family. And we fell in love pretty quick and have been together since then. She was 18. I was a much older and wiser 20. Uh, um, and then we went to school, went to college, moved around, went to different schools, eventually graduated. She eventually got her nursing degree, and we went to Peace Corps in Chile, in Patagonia, and that was a really important experience for both of us. Hard and lonely, and really bonding and complicated. And we came back from the Peace Corps with Jan pregnant, unplanned. I was going to go to graduate school, and that wasn't going to work with that situation because we had no money, and she was pregnant. So we went back. So she finished nursing school, and I ended up starting school at the BU, starting actually in a master's program at BU, and then made transfer to Texas A&M. They gave me money. Nobody else gave. Well, one other option, but it was Texas A&M was where we ended up. And then came out of that, and I had always been drawn to a relationship focus. I'd always wanted to work with kids. It was clear to me I wanted to work with kids. And ended up, getting my doctorate, doing my postdoc in both child and adult work, and moved to Maine. We'd lived in Maine for a year before we went to Texas. We'd moved out here. I had a sister that lived in New Hampshire, and so we moved, not to be close, well, to be close to her, but we'd enjoyed our time up here, and had moved to Portland. Then came back and started working initially in a psychiatric hospital, with working with a child and adolescent unit. I didn't feel good about a lot of what was going on there. Left that, and then started my own, with help from plenty of others, started a treatment program for kids, kindergarten through 12th grade, and we served 70 kids with a range of psychiatric disorders. And it was all attachment focused. It was all about bringing these kids into a program that was focused on their sense of kind of loving connection, as opposed to building structure and teaching them how to operate within the context of the structure based upon, the rewards and consequences. There certainly was structure in it. It wasn't just all a love fest, but the fundamental objective and work was around the formation of a deep caring relationships with these kids, and then also doing the family work of trying to do that. So I did that, written 3 books on various aspects of this sort of stuff. Most recently, a book called "What Helps When Children and Families Struggle" that I wrote with a younger female child psychiatrist whom I've taught with. I've taught at Tufts in the Department of Medicine as a clinical assistant clinical professor for 20 years. So I work with both adult and child psychiatrists in their last 3 years of their training before they go out on their own. Jan and I have been, we did the Peace Corps, and then we also built and lived part of the year at a home that we had in Nicaragua. And one of my grandkids was born in Nicaragua, because when you have homes in interesting places, your kids eventually go and live there. We were born in northern Maine, where they went and lived. Both of them had lived. Actually, both of my kids. Yeah, I've got a son who lives in Austin, and he is. Both of my kids are entrepreneurs. He has a 16-year-old and a 3-year-old. Same. That's a cautionary tale. And then in Maine, where my daughter lives, she has an 11-year-old and 8-year-old, and spend a lot of time with those kids, and spend a fair amount of time in Austin, with my other grandkids. So it's kind of where I am now. I'm teaching and doing some more writing, and just keep trying to learn how to do this work better. Hanging out with you some, learning how to bring that piece into the work. So that's kind of my story.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. And I love Austin, Texas. I've loved Austin, Texas for a long, long time. I'm sure it's it's changed so much since so many people from Los Angeles seem to move into, changed quite a bit, but it's such an amazing place. And anytime I started going there in 2010, and I've just loved it. I just fell in love with
It's
it.
fun. A lot of great music and
Great music.
good food, and the kids live right close to downtown, and so we don't have to get into the traffic much. They've got electric bikes, so we get electric bikes and whip it all over them. It's fun.
That's wonderful. And what a gift. Because I know, and I mean, maybe we could get into some of this, see where that goes. But because I don't have kids yet at this point, I do have nephews. Um, we'll see for myself and the trajectory. Put a pin in that one for a minute. But with kids, just what a gift, and also reflecting on the fact that you said about coming from this place of love, like that there's structure, but coming from a place of love. And again, once again, this theme is tying to something we were saying earlier about that sense of when we're being really strict with ourselves and we're pushing against something, that thing's going to push back the shame. I think how you said it was like shame would push back. And so, what a gift to bring that awareness to how you interact with kids. And I know that there's a lot of I'll see things about how like over coddling kids, or like participation trophies, like how that's not exactly useful, and we don't want to do that. On the other end, though, it's clear that just being freaking over structured, or over I don't even know exactly the word I'm looking for, but just being overly, not like overly disciplined, but I guess for like,
Yeah.
you know,
No, it's finding there's a niche there that you need to. There's not enough structure. Kids flounder, and they don't feel safe, and they're
mhm,
enfeebled by it. But if there's too much structure, kids don't get to explore, and they're enfeebled by it. So it's
yeah.
trying to find that range between the two. That and that's our job as parents, and kids. If you listen to them, they'll oftentimes give you pretty good cues about what they need and where they are in that. Um, yeah, I mean, I love my time with kids. I spend a
Mm.
lot of time with adolescents. A lot of families, struggling with adolescents. I love little ones too, but it's just I think we're as well as we are well connected. And
Mhm.
that's true of children as well as adults. But kids do need some structure, or they don't feel safe.
We are as well as we are well connected.
Yeah.
I love that. And yeah, the structure helps them feel safe. Well, so here's a specific one. So talk about working with adolescents. I'm sure you were never out of a job, right? Jeez. Uh,
True.
yeah, like working with adolescents. So here's a curious thing. When you say, like, when kids will kinda essentially, if you're listening and probably when you're listening with a certain attunement, right? Not just because again, talking about that love and fear thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
They need to
meaning
feel felt and heard.
yeah.
They need to have a sense that you get their hearts, but you also are trying to figure out what they're saying because
Yeah.
what they're saying makes sense.
Mhm.
People make sense. Now, it may not make sense in some other sense, but in the context of their neurology,
Yeah.
their history, and their relational experiences, people, what they do, they it makes sense. It always makes sense.
Yeah, so to that end, the thing that's coming up in my mind is around when adolescents, and I may or may not be partially speaking from personal experience, like myself when I say this, but I know that I was as a teenager, um, I could be kind of I don't know, maybe like edgy or, there's like that touch of anger. I mean, I wasn't certainly wasn't a perfect kid, but I also wasn't totally off the rail, like whatever. But the reason I'm saying this is because when it feels like a kid or especially an adolescent is being rebellious and pushing back against everything and being like, no, F you, mom or dad, or, they're like pushing back a lot. I think ironically, and this is what I'm curious about, that sometimes that comes like if there's a structure, the structure helps calm it down somehow. But if it's too much structure, it fuels the rebellion. So sometimes a kid's saying, like, I don't want to do this. I'm never doing that. So it seems like they want total freedom. But ironically, it seems to come from a fear place or something. So what do you
Oh,
think?
and I think you've got good instincts on that, John. From my perspective, yeah, the structure is a part of what helps them feel contained. It helps them feel safe. It helps them feel deeply known because, but too much structure and too much anger when the boundaries are like slamming into a wall, as opposed to a boundary being held, but the wall has a mattress. So you say, no, sweetheart, you can't use the car for the next 2 weeks because you came home 12 hours late. But and oh, it's terrible. I know it is. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But you're still not gonna get it.
Ah, I
A
like that.
boundary is just figuring out how to understand and accept what they're feeling, but also hold the boundary.
The boundary with a mattress instead of a wall.
It's largely in how you present it, what words you use. I think adolescents, parents, one of the biggest mistakes they make, I mean, one, they tell their kids that they're worried for them. That does not make kids feel better. Adolescence is like a kid who's up on a balance beam and he's never walked across it before. It's up high. And when he looks down at parents and they're looking frightened, and then maybe they're saying, wait, you got to, it doesn't help the kid make it across that beam. That kid needs to look down and see that parent say, you got it, buddy. And you're faking it because you're scared shitless as a parent that they don't. But the main thing that they need to see is that you believe in them. Now, it doesn't mean that you let them walk on every beam that comes up. Hopefully, over the course of their earlier childhood, you've set the limits. You said, no, you can't, sweetheart, you can't go swim in the pool by yourself. You can't. We're not doing it. And they learn to live with it. My son, he he's a wonderful guy, and he was a good kid, but he was drawn to the flame in many ways. He and his buddies used to go to railroad tracks, and they'd jump off the railroad tracks into the river. These are, and I knew him pretty well, and I knew I could tell him, you can't do it if your friends are doing it. It wouldn't go, I wasn't going to be recognizing that that's where he is. So the one thing I said to him, I said, Sammy, never be the first one to jump. And he told me not long ago, Dad, I never was.
Mm, good advice. You want someone else to test.
But when parents they don't understand the forces that are working on kids, that they're trying to establish themselves, whether with friends or a love or whatever, that we've got to be gentle, and we do have to help them see that we do know they make sense, even though jumping off this goddamn railroad tie didn't make sense, but it was a part of the culture of what he had to do.
I really appreciate you sharing these things and your expertise, and thank you again so much for taking the time
All
for
right, you take care, John.
conversation.
All right,
All right,
keep up
I'll
the
see
good
you.
work.
Mindfulness Unscripted on YouTube and Spotify. JohnOrsini.com for in-person events, Zoom sessions, and more.